It's only 3 weeks since Wollongong-based company Job Creators Proprietary Limited took over Top of the Town Motel, and already plans are afoot for major extensions and renovations. The company plans to double the amount of accommodation, have facilities for major conferences and give the motel a whole new look.
Initially we'll be completely refurnishing and refurbishing the rooms, but we're going to spend about $15 million on actually completely redoing the building a mirror image of accommodation units and adding function facilities.
The new General Manager, Bernie Boller, is confident that if the motel is good enough, it will lure tourists to the region. But they also plan to spearhead the lucrative conference market.
We feel that to fill motel rooms, you must attract large groups. The tourist market is good, but it's inconsistent and seasonal. The convention facilities that we'll be providing will drag a lot more corporate business into the area, and I think from a marketing point of view make people more aware of Newcastle as a destination anyway.
In other tourist development news, Lake Macquarie City Council has rejected a proposal to have a public hearing into the $500 million Caves Beach resort development. After a 45-minute debate last night, the council voted 7-6 against a motion that the council call a public hearing to consider the social, economic and environmental effects of the proposed resort.
There was an overflow gallery at City Hall last night as concerned citizens waited to hear the final decision. It took the council more than 3 hours to make it. There was an angry outburst resulting in a 5-minute adjournment when Alderman Ron Robinson commented that those who opposed the development included defeated candidates and school teachers.
I'll sit here and take my position as a ratepayer in this town. I refuse to accept the insults of this country.
When the meeting resumed, Lord Mayor Alderman John McNaughton defended criticism of the development, focusing on its economic merits for the city. Finally, Council passed a motion 7-4, enabling the project to go ahead, subject to 20 conditions. They include the need for the planned 31-storey tower to be redesigned, possibly in a tiered effect, similar to but smaller than these American illustrations. Demonstrated in these pictures, the planned new design will reduce the impact of the tower on the skyline. While developers were pleased with Council's decision, many members of the gallery were annoyed, having earlier submitted a petition asking Council to delay its decision.
We feel the Council's totally ignored for example, the 500 people turned up at the public meeting, the 150 people at the public access meeting, the 800 or 900 signatories on our petition, and we could have got thousands and thousands and thousands more.
In tonight's news, a report on new technology assisting an old industry. Hunter Valley dairy farmers are now able to benefit from a computer program which analyses costs and profits for better farm management.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Aldermen debated for more than 3 hours last night before passing a motion 7-4 to allow the development to proceed. An overflowing gallery heard the final decision. The meeting was disrupted at one stage when Alderman Ron Robinson commented on development opponents, describing some as publicly employed teachers and defeated candidates. When the crowd voiced its anger, the meeting was adjourned.
I didn't come here to be insulted and spend my time in here. I come here to play a role like you and anybody else.
Will you please?
I'll sit here and take my position as a ratepayer in this town. I refuse to accept the insults of this country.
Should we ask all the school teachers in the room to leave since we're being insulted?
Council made its decision shortly afterwards, despite the presentation of a petition with more than 800 signatures asking Council to delay its decision. The Lord Mayor believes the developer will be happy to comply with 20 conditions, which include the need to redesign the office tower, establish a public viewing facility, place a sculpture or artwork in Civic Plaza and develop the plaza to then be transferred to Council. While the developer must comply, conditions may be modified.
In any condition, it's open to negotiation, but it's negotiation with the council. And often there's points of clarification. You know, what do you really mean by this? Do you need to have the sculpture that's required? Has it got to be a tall one or a short one? Or, look, we'd rather put it in Civic Park and not going to have it in the plaza at all. Things like that. The negotiations on conditions always go on there.
He hopes construction will begin after Christmas, with demolition work to begin before then.
What will eventually be demolished will be everything between Wheeler Place, Hunter Street, Derby Street, King Street, except the administration building, the Frederick Ash building and the new tax office. But,
the Lord Mayor hopes the project will be finished within 3 years. Meanwhile, plans may be afoot for another tall building. Although no formal application has been lodged, Council has received a letter containing a sketch plan for a proposed hotel office development at the Pink Elephant Market site in Newcastle's West End. The letter was sent by site owners, Vintex Proprietary Limited.
But we
Most of us only have a vague idea of the continuing stream of frustrations that confront people with a disability. Even relatively simple chores can become a real problem when facilities don't properly cater for the disabled. Today, in an operation called Access Awareness, workers from Maitland City Council were divided into teams and became either blind or wheelchair-ridden. They were then sent off to do a range of tasks that able-bodied people would find quite straightforward. Like most of the wheelchair subjects, the trip to town for city engineer Bob Lee became quite an ordeal. First stop was the cultural centre, which proved quite inaccessible. Then, after tussling through steps and doors at the Hunter District Water Board, Mr Lee was told that there were facilities for the disabled. They were just located round the back. Back on the trail again, a trip through the plaza became even worse. Mr Lee became bogged down in a minefield of building work. Last stop was the library, which had a ramp that was so steep you'd have to be a wheelchair mountain climber to use it. Maitland's Mayor Peter Blackmore hopes the experience will help council workers ensure facilities better cater for the disabled.
Well, the idea is to make council officers and staff more aware of the facilities required for disabled people in this town. After all, our officers are the consenting authority and the planning authority, that they make these provisions available in the city. Now, if they're not aware of what's required, I think we could have a tendency to be a little bit lax in the provision of such facilities.
I mean, certainly, do you think that it perhaps gives them a...
While public debate over the proposed Caves Beach project rages, Mr Gordon wants to reassure people. He says calls for an environmental impact study have no base, as the former state government's Department of Environment and Planning accepted a study undertaken in 1984.
The environment was taken under consideration then, and that hasn't altered at all at this point in time. In fact, it's got worse. All that's happened since that period of time is more car bodies and greater desecration of the area with four-wheel drive and trail bikes. A greater degree of rubbish has been dumped there, and I think that people should realise that we recognise the natural abilities of the site and are about protecting them and enhancing them.
And he says after a 7-6 vote, the Lake Macquarie City Council has decided there's no need for a public inquiry.
Are you afraid of a public inquiry?
No, I'm not afraid of a public inquiry, but there's no need to have something that's not required.
If the council gives the green light to the project, on-site development of a golf course could begin as early as October. He says a start could be made on the hotel complex by the middle of next year, with the official opening by late 1990.
Now, it's a $500 million project. Does Gordon Pacific have the funds available for that?
Well, $500 million over a period of 10 years We are currently developing properties throughout Australia which would amass to probably $150 million. Hence the way the project is staged as to whether someone has the capacity or not. We've got plenty of people who want to be involved with us, I might tell you, and so we don't have any shortage of people who wish to take equity in the development, and we'll gauge those as the development progresses.
How much money is available towards the project now?
Well, that's something that the company knows about, and I don't think it's a public nature.
Meanwhile, although some land on the site is already zoned residential, he says Gordon Pacific wants to increase the density of residential areas.
If council didn't approve the resort, would you consider turning the whole area into a residential area?
Again, that would be the subject of another rezoning application, wouldn't it?
Would you do it?
That's a matter which we'd consider at a later stage. We don't think that'll happen anyway.
The new slide sent boulders crashing down, disrupting rescue workers' efforts to reach the dozens of people believed buried. So far, only one body has been recovered. Meanwhile, in Mexico, one of 3 fires which forced thousands from their homes has reignited. The fire in petrol storage tanks killed 4 people.
Today's match was the game of the round, and that's what it proved to be. Melita were undefeated at the top of the table, and Newcastle, although in 4th place, had only lost 1 of their last 8 games. The match was the most physical seen at Austral Park, with 5 yellow cards handed out. 15 minutes into the first half, a superb cross from David Jones finds the outstretched boot of Robbie Holden to give him his 9th goal of the season. In the 29th minute, any chance of Melita winning was lost when Sandy was given a red card and sent from the field for charging the Newcastle goalkeeper. Although down to 10 players, Melita threw everything at Newcastle but couldn't crack the rock-solid defence. Some spite also crept into the game as both sides battled to gain the upper hand. It wasn't until the 40th minute of the second half. Newcastle sealed the win with a goal from Martin Cummings.
As many as 10,000 netball players, officials and supporters are expected for the 3 days of competition over July 2nd, 3rd and 4th. Players from the ages of 13 to 15 years will compete, and due to the large number of courts required, the championships have been split between Newcastle, Charlestown and Lakeside. At the official media launch in Newcastle this afternoon, officials from the local clubs plus the New South Wales Netball Association gathered to finalise details of this huge event. Australian representative Lisa Behag also attended the launch, still brimming after the Australian team's magnificent victories against the Trinidad and Tobago side. Lisa, who is coaching the under-13 Sutherland representative side in the championships, played in this event herself some years ago and sees it as a breeding ground for future talent. In its performance of Leopold Mozart's Toy Symphony. Sportsman Sam Stewart and Mark Richards, NBN newsreaders Ray Deneen and Anna Manzoni, the Lord Mayor Alderman John McNaughton and member for Newcastle George Keegan are among those who have pooled their musical talents for tonight's celebrity concert. Conductor Ulrich Bernstein says the once stuffy image of classical music is changing.
It's becoming very trendy to like classical music even amongst people who have never ever listened to classical music before. And people who buy records, and particularly compact discs, they're all collecting their Vivaldi Four Seasons and their Beethoven Fifth and their Tchaikovsky Pathetique. And we're trying to prove with this concert music can be great fun.
Sitting on their rocking horses, playing such instruments as the cuckoo whistle, the toy trumpet, the quail and the triangle, at rehearsal today the celebrity musicians certainly seem to enjoy the show. But will they play in tune?
Well, a lot of the instruments won't play in tune, in fact, and they are toy instruments, and we're trying to get the celebrities to play the wrong notes in the right place, perhaps. But I think Leopold Mozart was intended to be good fun, and the more out of tune it is, the funnier the piece really is.
At a news conference this morning, Mr Baird said that a lack of funds in the government's coffers left it with no other alternative but to invite private enterprise to do the job. The minister said the proposed toll road, a 22-kilometre stretch from Buliadelah to Coolongolook, was needed to eliminate the poor alignment, sharp curves and steep grades of the existing highway.
This is a stretch of road which has a very serious accident rate. The roads to the north and the south have accident rates which are 3 times less than the rate across this stretch of road. And unless we had it as a toll road, we wouldn't be seeing funding until well after the year 2000.
The $25 million project is initially to be a 2-lane highway, with overtaking lanes where necessary. But Department of Main Road engineers predict after 10 years the road will need to be expanded to 4 lanes. With traffic levels increasing, no one can doubt the need to improve roads in the area, but some local landholders are angry.
What's your problem with this new tollway?
Well, I suppose I've got 2 problems. The fact that it goes through our land, but I think that my immediate problem is that the lack of communication between people in authority and the landholders, which has angered me that, you know, people whose lives are going to be ruined and land ravaged haven't been spoken to.
And the minister's reaction?
Well, I believe there could have been some improved consultation between the DMR officials and the landholders. It's always difficult when you're going to travel across a large number of landholders' properties, and also when the route actually hasn't been determined, because it's only a proposed route and they're going to have to look at the environmental impact requirements of it.
At a sometimes heated public meeting held later in Buliadelah, opinion was equally divided about the merits of the proposed tollway. Peter Ryan for NBN News.
Like many development proposals, plans to redevelop Bar Beach Pavilion have caused a storm of controversy. Newcastle City Council has approved in principle a plan by Newcastle builders Maitland and Sharp to demolish the old Spanish-style pavilion built during the Depression and to replace it with this. Under the Maitland and Sharp plan, the new building, which would have a restaurant and public facilities, would be built in 7 months at a cost of $4.7 million. It would not cost the council a cent, and Maitland and Sharp would advance the council $1 million for a 40-year lease. But the plan has not been well received in all quarters. The council has received a petition signed by more than 100 people opposing the development on the grounds that public access will be taken away. One vocal group has opposed the development, saying that a commercial enterprise should not be built on public land, while others, like the National Trust, believe the building should be preserved for historical reasons.
With such a range of views, one thing is for certain: tonight's meeting is bound to provoke some lively debate. Jane Button for NBN News.
The 20 health workers have travelled from as far away as the Northern Territory and South Australia. While many institutions run health science courses, the Institute of Higher Education is the first to have developed a course specifically for Aboriginal people. Much of the one-year course is done by correspondence, although it also includes 2 4-day residential schools. The course covers nutrition, communication and means of accessing available health care. Course coordinator John Heath says while it is not only for Aborigines, the course is specifically catered to their needs.
The course developed on the initiative of Aboriginal health workers, and we're actually extending that so that it includes any Aboriginal community worker. At the same time, none of our courses, although they may be specifically denominated as Aboriginal courses, they don't actually exclude non-Aboriginal people.
According to New South Wales Aboriginal Health Unit Coordinator Grace Close, incorrect diet is one of the major problems facing Aboriginal people today. She says the average lifespan of an Aboriginal male is only 48 years, and with a growing incidence of heart disease and diabetes, re-education is vital.
And nutrition must be the highlight of those programs. And we can talk about many topics like diabetes, heart disease, alcohol, and it's all with nutrition. It cannot be separated.
Are you seeing any results?
Just as many people were beginning to think that the plan by Newcastle builders Moylan and Sharp to demolish the old Spanish-style pavilion and to replace it with this was a fait accompli, Newcastle's Lord Mayor has signalled that there might be a change in direction. He says he shares many of the fears expressed at last night's public access meeting about the impact of the Moylan and Sharp proposal on Bar Beach. Alderman McNaughton is particularly worried about having 4 bars located on a family beach and believes the plan is an overdevelopment of the site.
There's a very, very large number of people in that building. There's too much alcohol available right on a beach. The proximity to the beach itself. My fears are precisely matter of fact, I think I could have signed Mrs McCarty's submission as being my own views on the subject. I'm concerned about those very issues.
Last night, council was addressed by 6 residents who all hammered the message that the development would ruin what is probably Newcastle's most popular family beach. They also voiced concern about what they say would be a privatisation precedent and said people in the city would be losing control of public land. Alderman McNaughton says he does not want to preempt council's decision on the issue, but it would be considering the fears expressed at the meeting.
Council will now take on board all that was said at the meeting last night, and we had actually documented some excellent submissions, one in particular that we've got. We'll examine those and in due course make a decision about it.